top of the page. In the Maamar in Ruach HaMoishel from the year 1924, authored by the previous Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. So top of Reish Yud Ches. You got that? The Kitzer. I want to read the Kitzer of what we learned the last few days. You guys have that, Reish Yud Ches? Yeah. Kitzer. Yevaya, we explained, the Ruach HaMoishel hu memshola. The power of domination, of control, is memshola. Governing, leadership, dominion. V'yiksha, and we questioned. The Vadai, surely, the Misha Nitan Loi Memshola, someone who has been given authority from on high, God has given someone a position of authority, who tzaddik u bal Torah. He's definitely righteous, he's a tzaddik, and he's a bal Torah, he's a man of Torah, an owner of Torah. So if that's the case, v'eich shayich bo inyan achet, how is it possible for him to have an issue of transgression, which is the next half of the verse, umarpe michatoim gedolim. So it implies that this person who is in a position of dominion and control and governing, which is a gift and a blessing seemingly from God, yet it seems like he's involved with transgression. How did the two go together? That was the basic question on the verse in the Maamar. Yes?
So when he says marpe, he's talking about like marpe yadayim, that the hands weaken. Is the word refuah also associated with those same letters?
Yes. Okay. Look at the root word of marpe is reish pei aleph.
Right.
and Hillel, he brought those. He said that in the Maamar earlier in the first chapter that the word marpe is associated with rifyon, and refuah. And today he's going to talk more about that.
I thought I remembered that, and I didn't see it in the summary here.
Okay. The Yataritz, and what is the answer to his question? The marpe loshen rifoyin. Marpe, number one, is associated with the word rifyoin, loosening up, letting go. V'yavaya dayideho anova, and he explains that through having humility, and in nitfis ba'aven adoir, one won't be captured in the sin of the generation. The Moshe v'Aaron, shehoyu b'chinas ma. They were totally subservient to Hashem, which is in Kabbalah called the level of memhei, ma. What is it? I can't tell you what it is because there's no ego there, so there's no definition and form and description. It's ma. What is it? And as well, the Yoshua nikra misharis. One moment, please. Yoshua is called a servant, right? Moshe. That means that he was a perpetual servant before, during, and after Moshe's lifetime. Yoshua was a perpetual servant, which is bittul ho'atzmi, the Talmud Rabbi. The essential humility and subservience of a student to a teacher. And like we discussed yesterday, how, to be a real, to be a real makabel, to be a real recipient of teaching from a teacher, one needs to be subservient to him with a bittul atzmi. Yes, Hillel.
I was wondering if you might expound a little on that in relation to the teaching from the Tanya that the Smira Chochma, Koachma.
Yes, very good. So that's in chapter 30, chapter 3, and elaborated in chapter 35 in Tanya. It's one of the few places the Alter Rebbe says, "I heard this from my teacher," referring to the Maggid. I think it's only twice in Tanya where the Alter Rebbe actually says, "Shamaiti mimoiri." I heard from my master, referring to the Maggid. And one of the places in chapter 35 regarding this issue, that Chochma is comprised of the two ideas, Koach Ma, the power of what is, of what is it, which is the idea of Bittul. So the Alter Rebbe says that he heard that from, that Or Ein Sof, that the infinite light of Hashem invests itself specifically in Chochma. In other words, Bina is not the abode of the Ein Sof. Why? Because Bina is already one's interpretation and of the information. So when there is your own interpretation, it's already a step down. There's not as much bittul as the position of Chochmah, which is totally in the receiving mode. And like I've been telling you, it's the idea of the concept of an idea, where a person has a dilemma and a problem, and all of a sudden a flash of lightning goes on in his mind, and you can see it on his face, where his face smiles and lights up, and you ask him what happened, and he says, I just solved a problem that I was thinking about for years or months or whatever, and it hit me now, the answer. And you say, what is the answer? I don't know. But meanwhile, you're smiling and you're all happy. Why? Because the inspiration was there, the flash of inspiration. So the Alter Rebbe, going back to your question, Hillel, the Alter Rebbe in chapter 35 in Tanya says this is what Chochmah is, and you can actually see it, Boaz, in the words Chochmah. Chochmah is Koyach, Ma, those four letters, Koyach, Chof Ches, and Mem Hey. When you reverse it, you get Chochmah. The koyach means the power, the potential. Ma, of something. What is it? I don't know what it is yet. So the position of chokhmah in the mind, right, is the position of the bittul, the humility and subservience of the mind. And so too, when it comes to the creation of the world, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates the world, the beginning of creation begins with the world being in a position of what? Of bittul, right? Because if at the time of creation the world would have ego and would in any way, shape, or form, then it wouldn't be able to receive. You can't receive at the same time that you're being mashpia. Remember what we learned yesterday. It doesn't work. And I gave you a very practical example. And if you think about it, I think you'll see it's true. When a real student who gathers information has to shut off and turn off completely the idea that I want to understand it, and I have questions. And if you listen to information that way, you're not really receiving, because you're already in a position of commenting. And that's what happens many times in a classroom with students. And, I'm sure every one of us here have seen this. Or even with the parenting. You start sharing something with your children, and all of a sudden they're already commenting and questioning and thinking. They're not really receiving. So if you're not really receiving, you don't have it. So when you comment before you have it, that's foolishness. You don't really know what I'm saying. Listen completely. Just take it all in. Take it all in, and don't even think about, I'm going to comment and think about what I'm being told. Even that is already a non-receiving mode. When you listen, you have to be totally in the mode of Kabbalah, of receiving. And that's the position of Chokhmah. And that's why, one second, Yoni, one moment. Let me finish the thought. Okay. Exactly. Please don't do that, because you're not listening. You got to listen first. So the Rebbe is saying the first thing is Chokhmah. Chokhmah means go into the mode of receiving. I'm here. I just want to hear and receive. Once I hear and I receive, then I can already think about it, process it, and then comment. Yes, Yoni.
So isn't this, Rabbi, like one of the issues facing the Jewish world, where a lot of these chumras have come into play? Things that necessarily, let's say 100 years ago, like I remember my grandfather telling me, he said if you saw a guy, not working, it was a very strange thing. Like, you have very few people, let's say, sitting and learning in Kailo, and you had very few people, like the Chumrah situation is a new thing, and like people are taking upon themselves more culturally, the Labush, and things that are not necessarily halacha or even hashkafa. It's like cultural. It's like added things to Yiddishkeit that have really nothing to do with Yiddishkeit.
Well, look, when you say it has nothing to do with Yiddishkeit, I can't agree with that last part. It depends what it is. Some things, you're right, are totally stupidity and self-made up and ridiculous. But there are other things that have been introduced because of the times that are very healthy and important. And the fact is that Yiddishkeit has grown exponentially since your grandfather's time. That's a fact. That's not, a Baba Maisa. Okay? Hundreds of thousands of more people are keeping Shabbos than during the 1920s in Philadelphia and Boston, Chicago, and Manhattan, when there was a wave of secularism to leave Frumkeit and Yiddishkeit, and that's changed. So to say that the increase of Chumras has led to a lessening of Torah and mitzvahs is not true. Nevertheless, some of the Chumras and some of these things are just extra pressure that is not necessary. But in life, they come together. It's a package deal. Because we aren't perfect. Our teachers aren't perfect. The rabbis aren't perfect. We aren't perfect. So therefore, you have to put up with it. You have to put up with it. And a person who's connected and who has a Rav, who has a Mashpia, and he has a good friend, and he checks with them, and he discusses it, knows how to balance everything. And that's it. But to go and say that the Chumras has led to a disaster in the community, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say those that abuse the Chumras, and there are plenty who do that. Like you said, in your grandfather's time, everyone worked. So those that are sitting and mooching off others, and they are able to work, like I told you, the Belzer Rebbe 10, 15 years ago announced to his Hasidim on Simchas Torah is the day when he gives his mission statement for the year. It's that time. So the Belzer Rebbe said, ladies and gentlemen, Rabbi Sai, we have your koilel and we're paying you, but until now you were learning all day. Now you're only going to learn a half a day if you want to get paid by us. The other half, you're going to go to school, you're going to get an accounting degree, you're going to get a bookkeeping degree, you'll get a computer degree, and you're going to work a half a day. And he implemented that, and thousands of Belzer Hasidim now have jobs, and they're bringing in a parnasa a half a day. Okay, so there was a major shift in their culture, and their culture is one that is very, very rigid, and very disciplined in the Hasidic lifestyle. And he blew the whistle. He was a whistleblower. He was the whistleblower, and he wasn't ashamed to say that he was the whistleblower. And guess what? It's now 15 years later, and thousands, and there's a shasha. At the beginning, there was such a rash. There was such noise and an uproar. How can a Hasidic Rebbe push going to work when we would need to learn more in Kolel, and on and on? And the same you have in other issues now with the enrollment in the army. And I don't know enough to take a position, but what I see is that there are those that are warming up to it. What is it better for boys and girls to be on the streets, or is it better for them to get their, excuse the expression, their backside kicked in, become a mensch, get out there, take a gun, protect the country, and come back and be a strong civilian and a mensch, and more frum. Now, I'm not saying it happens to everybody. I'm not foolish. It doesn't. But for many, and I know some, and you know some, it does happen. So that's also a revolution. Who thought of, in the 1940s when there was the draft, and the 50s and the 60s, all yeshiva bacher in America were looking for an exemption. And many signed up to study and officially get rabbinic ordination, smicha, just as a way out. So I was sitting with someone in shul, he has a big beard, and he was wearing a big spudik, the ger wear not just a shtreimel, but a spodek, a large fur hat, tall. And I'm looking at him, and he's 75 years old. And he has a very interesting history. I'm not going to go into it, but very interesting. So he told me that in 1963, he was drafted. So his grandfather, who was known as the Pittsburgher Rebbe, he was a Hasidic Rebbe in Pittsburgh either before the war, after, or whatever. And he was a very Hasidic, and he moved to Crown Heights later. And he told him, I want you to consult with the Lubavitcher Rebbe whether you should even seek an exemption. Do a dreidel, do a spitzel, do a shtick, And he went into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him he should not do it. He should enroll. This way he won't make a chilul Hashem. And but the Rebbe gave him a bracha, and the Rebbe said, you will come back unhurt. You will come back. And he fought in Vietnam. Not only did he fight in Vietnam, but he provided, he helped with the kosher food and the minyan, and he was like a shliach, an emissary in Vietnam. And here, sitting across me in Borough Park with his long beard and his spodek, who would think that he was in Vietnam? Okay? And that's only because he went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who told him he shouldn't try to get out of the draft. But we know that the culture at the time was to get out of the draft. Today, in Eretz Yisrael, there's the issue, and it's a constant fight whether you should or you shouldn't, and it's a very big political issue. And from the Hafganas, the protests, and down in Bet Shemesh over there, they burned the tires and they burned the buses and they stopped the traffic. That's all part of it. And I'm not taking sides. I don't know enough. Yes, no, but the idea is that we find. This is all a response to you, Yoni, that the Jewish community, the Frum community, is together with its religiosity and Frumkeit and Chumras is looking at things that government and others are expecting and demanding and wanting as a way to go further. Okay, we have to go further now. Page Reish Yud Ches, we're at the second paragraph, the long paragraph. We begin now. V'hinei be'oimek yoser, more deeply to understand this, ki marpe yaniach hachtoyim gedolim. The verse in Koheles says, Shlomo HaMelech says, for healing will alleviate great sin. Yuvim bepirush abei. So Hillel here is going to focus on the second meaning of the word marpe, which you asked about earlier. Although until now we've really focused on marpe of being associated with the word rifyoin, letting go, loosening up. The Rebbe says, but the primary interpretation of the word marpe, hu lashon refuah, it's associated with the word refuah, healing. Upirish, ki marpe de godel hadoir, eisa refuah lirpois hachatoyim gedolim shel hadoir. The healing of the leader of the generation causes healing for all of the generation, saving them from great sin. What does that mean? The idea is the attribute. Yes?
No, it's okay. I'm just looking for that.
Okay, the attribute of anova, of humility, is a way, is from the drachim, the ways of tshuva. And he brings the Rambam. Rambam. V'tshuva zu, in other words, for tshuva, a person needs to have humility, has to have anova. V'tshuva zu, and this type of tshuva, hi refuah la'olam, this brings healing to the world. The olam, the word world, but in Hebrew, olam, hu helem, is associated with the word helem, concealment, to hide. In other words, the world hides God. It disguises God. V'tshuva hi refuah, and tshuva is a healing el hehelem to this concealment. You see what he's doing here, the previous Rebbe? He's taking the Chazal, v'tshuva zu hi refuah le'olam, and he's giving it a Hasidic interpretation, that since the word olam also is associated with the word helem. Helem means to conceal and hide, referring to the hiding of God's presence. God's presence is hidden in the world. So when you do tshuva, you bring healing to that concealment. And as the rabbis teach us, the sages say, Gedela tshuva shemivia refuah le'olam. Great is tshuva that leads, that brings healing to the universe, to the world. Like they refuah zu the tshuva, through this refuah, which in itself is tshuva, shehi slichas avaynois, this is the pardoning of transgression of sins, yaniach chatoyim gedolim, it alleviates great sin. So basically, what he's saying here, just not to lose the point, that anava, that humility is an integral part of tshuva. If Ruvain, a person does tshuva and the person is full of arrogance, that tshuva is weak, if not worthless. Because the Rambam says, Maimonides writes, that in order for tshuva to be healthy and powerful and correct, you need it to be centered, based on anova, humility. And that's when, Hillel, it accomplishes refuah le'olam, refuah lahelem. It heals the concealment. What is in disguise and blocked and not apparent, through this type of tshuva, it becomes clear and obvious and healthy to us. And when that takes place, we also receive pardoning, slicha, al chatoyim gedolim, for greater sins and transgressions. Why? Mishu anav HaMoishel al elbainai, someone who's modest, and he forgives, he pardons al elbainai, when he was ashamed, when someone embarrassed him. Right? Nikra ish, Chazal say, based on verses in the Torah and Tanakh, he's called a man, erech apayim, of lengthening his apayim, anger. In other words, if you are able to pardon and forgive someone who embarrasses you, and all that shows that you really have a lot of humility. Sha'ol of Nemar, Shlomo Melech says in Mishlei, Toiv, erech apayim, it's better to lengthen your anger, meaning to control your anger, migibar, than someone that is a body builder and lift weights and a big macho. Gibar, a wrestler, a boxer, strong, the muscles are popping. So Shlomo Melech says, Toiv erech apayim. If you're able to control your anger, and if you're able to display humility, that although someone embarrasses you, and you're about to clobber them, and you're about to wipe them away with your mouth, and you keep quiet, and you swallow it, if you're able to do that, Shlomo Melech says, you're stronger than a gibor, than someone who has big muscles. V'harafua, what?
It's better.
Right, it's better. Thank you. V'harafua hu me'arech ampin. Now he throws in a piece of Kabbalah here. It says in Kabbalah that refuah, where does refuah come from? You guys, we're always asking it, Eino Hashem v'nei rofei. Misha Beirach Ruvain, Misha Beirach Abaseda, Misha Beirach. We're always talking about and asking for healing. Where does it come from? So it says that refuah comes from what's called Arich Ampin. Arich Ampin means long faces. Shehu P'chinas Keser, that's the crown. 1 second. That's the crown of Hashem. The Sham Hu Makim Anava. So he gives us here, laser, a logistical information that we should know. Where 1 second. Where does refuah come from? A place of another. That's the point he's making. That healing, that refuah is associated with another. And where is another's abode? Where? In the crown of God called Keser. Yes, Hillel.
So isn't that's pretty much what he said about Tchias HaMesim in the last Maamar?
Yes.
In the same place.
Yeah, okay, fine. There's room for two.
For healing at the Tchias HaMesim.
Now he brings the Sefer Reishis Chochma, which is from the early Sfarim of Musar. Sharo Anova, the portal of Anova, Peidik Aleph. What does it say over there in Reishis Chochma? Quote. Yes? I can't hear. What?
The Reishis Chochma is buried right here in Hebron. You can go visit him next time you come.
Thank you. I didn't know that. Where is he buried in Hebron? In the old cemetery?
Ask me, Belina, I'll take you.
Okay. We have a deal. Thank you very much. We got a date. Laser and I have a date. Good. Baruch Hashem. Let's go further. So he says over there, the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim Moirim Al Ha'anavo. The 13 attributes of mercy are associated with humility. We just came through Yom Kippur and Chodesh Elul, and we know that there was a shine of 13 attributes of rachamim, of mercy, that came to the world. So what we're learning now is they are all based. Look at the words, morim. They denote al ha'anava. You can't have rachamim without anava. And this is what he said earlier in the Maamar, if you recall, that anava, that humility and modesty, is a mainstay of everything else. Without anava, nothing else flows. Why not? Because there's always the eye that's stuck there. And if the eye is stuck there, the eye is messed up. There's no perfection. The eye is not perfect. Humility, the opposite of the eye, that is, like you said earlier, Hillel, from chapter 35 in Tanya, where Hashem rests. Ein Sof, the infinite God, from the name of the Maggid, the Alter Rebbe says, where does Ein Sof, where does infinity of God rest? In Chochmah. Let's go further. Therefore, if the leader of the generation is one who is an Anav, who's modest, who marpe hachatoim g'dolim shel doirei, he accomplishes healing of all of sin, of great sin of the generation. The Lefi Pirush HaMedrash Rabbah, who, based on the Medrash Rabbah that we quoted in the first chapter, who medarke hamusar, it's part of the way of ethics. Asher Gedolei Yisrael, that, listen to this, Yoni, that leaders, Gedolei Yisrael, lo yistoireru al hatzibur, they shouldn't overpower with their authority the congregation, the community. Lema, by saying, quote, Ani miroshi alfa Yisrael. You know who I am? I am from the leaders of the generation. And the Rebbe says, just learn from Zechariah. Kehod Zechariah, he quoted earlier in chapter 1, Zechariah, Shiro atzmei godl mikolom. He saw himself greater than the rest of the people. Lefi shehoya, why? He was Chassan HaMelech. Number 1, let's go back. He was a son-in-law of the king. Number 2, the Kohen Gadol. What a big macher. He's the high priest. Number 3, the Navi, a prophet. Number 4, Dayan, a judge. Do you need any more? Look at the accolades. Look who he was. He was a big man. In Yiddish, a großer Mensch. And we say also, Arashke Bahag. You know, sometimes you have a title before Rabbi Rashke Behag, which means Reish Shel B'nei HaGoyla. He's the head of all the Jews in the Galut, you know? So this man, Zechariah, was really big stuff. He was a heavyweight. This isn't a lightweight fighter in the boxing ring. This is a heavyweight in the boxing ring. But guess what? With all of his accolades and his greatness, he started to be pompous, and he started to speak big talk, like a big shot. And what did he say? He spoke to the Jews and he said, why are you guys desecrating God's will? And he said to them, you're not going to succeed. You think you're going to have one over God? It ain't going to work. But what he used to get his message across is he emphasized the punishment. You're going to burn. You're going to suffer. You're going to fail. Is that the way we educate a child? Educate a student? You're no good for nothing. If you do this, you're going to fall. If you did, the negativity. Well, he did it a big time to the Jews. Hifligu behaflogas ha'inish. He criticized them by emphasizing the punishment. And this is why he was ultimately killed, and this is why he's considered a leader that failed and did not take leadership and authority in the right way, because he blew his own horn too big. The horn was blown too big. You weren't supposed to emphasize the negativity. And here begins the treatise, Hillel, of the previous Rebbes on criticism. So from here, from Amnam, you can make a note, begins the previous Rebbe's Shita, his view of constructive criticism. But he first begins it with a rhetorical question. However, seemingly, this is the makeup of criticism. And he quotes the pasuk of Vayikra, scold, shall you give musar to your friend? The Omer Azal, afilu me'apamim, the Chazal say in the Gemara above Metzia, even 100 times. You see him doing something wrong once, twice, even 100 times. Uve Erkin, the Gemara in Erkin says, Isa, at heichen teichocha, how much are you obligated to scold the other? Rava, when you see him doing something no good, Rav says, ad hakor, until hitting. Upirish Rashi, what does that mean? Ad heichen adam chayiv lechichas chaveirei. How much does a person have to scold his friend? Ad hakor, ad sheyiktzayv zeh v'yakes emechiach. Until the one you're scolding gets so upset and angry and gives you a slug. He can't take it anymore. Go, boom! He hits you. Shut up. Be quiet. Enough already. I heard you. But he doesn't just say it verbally. He uses his hand. That's what Rav says. Going back now, this seems to be the mitzvah of scolding, of heichacha, of musar. Leyasrei b'musarav, to give him heavy musar. Now this parenthesis, although it's in a parenthesis, is worth $1 million because it gives us the conditions of the one condition that's that is the most important condition of giving heichacha. Farak, look what he says. Farak, shalei levaishe berabim, tuvia. When we're saying over here that one is obligated to give musar, right? Says the Rebbe, but you're not allowed to do that berabim in public. If you see someone doing wrong, and you're in shul, Ruvain, someone comes to the Torah and makes a mistake, or not makes a mistake, or does something that you know he knows better, and he's intentionally doing it in a way that's contrary to what the halacha says, and therefore you scream at them and you embarrass them, berabim, that's contrary to proper giving teichacha, giving scolding. Avol, beinoi lebein atzmoi, between four eyes, in a private setting. Yochel leimar loi, you could tell him, shera darkoi, your ways are bad, ulavaishoi bezeh, and to privately embarrass him. He tells him the truth. He means embarrassing, meaning he calls him on it. He says, hey guy, you went to yeshiva, you know, you're a frum guy, you know what you're doing, cut the nonsense, stop it, and it's wrong. But this is a private setting. This is not in front of anyone else. And sometimes we're on the phone, and we're in a heated conversation, and we have other people, including family members, listening. That's also wrong. Go to your room, go to your office, speak in private. And he says further, and you tell this person, your activity is like the activity of an animal, without human intelligence. You're acting like an animal. Why was Zechariah punished? Now, when I read this question, I said he was punished because he did it in public. The answer is that it looks to be that the public setting of Zechariah was an acceptable public setting. In other words, I have to check Zechariah. I didn't get a chance to check it, but Zechariah was prophesying. It could be he was prophesying in his room, and the word would get out. So I don't believe Zechariah was embarrassing them in public. He started to say a prophecy, and and that itself was already acting with a big shotness, that I'm Zechariah, I have all these 4 accolades, and I'm a judge, and this and that, and that already wasn't acceptable. So there's no contradiction between what we said in the parentheses, that to embarrass someone, to scold someone in public is an embarrassment. We'll stop here and we'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. Everyone have a good day.